Well, hey, everyone. This is Heidi St. John. Welcome to the Heidi St. John podcast. I'm glad you guys are here. Today is Mailbox Monday. This is the day of the week when I answer listener questions and catch you up on some of the best news that's happened over the last couple of days. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Well, I'm glad you guys have tuned in today. It was such a pleasure to meet many of you at the Salt and Light Policy Conference this past weekend in North Carolina. And the same morning that I flew out to that, actually, I had the privilege and honor of emceeing the largest fundraiser in the area for would-be governor of Washington State, Dave Reichert. I hope, and as I'm traveling the country and speaking out on behalf of candidates, and also doing a little bit of work in churches as it relates to getting churches off the bench and onto the battlefield, that we really are seeing what I hope is something that will go into and beyond this coming election, and that is Christians again beginning to realize that they can't just sit this thing out and wait for the rapture to come back, that they've stopped believing the lie of the separation of church and state, at least as it's been framed by the left for generations in this country, and also that we recognize that when Jesus said we are to take dominion, that means that Christians belong in every sphere of influence. So we should be in education, we should be in politics, we should be in medicine, we should be in entertainment. God's people are a necessary component of being salt and light, and that means that we should be everywhere. And so I'm encouraged to see more and more people, more and more Christians, and a lot of them with pretty big platforms, stepping up and saying, this is the right time, this is the right place, and we are the people for the job. God is not surprised by what's happening in the culture right now. The Lord of Heaven's armies not up in heaven, wringing his hands, wondering why he gave this assignment to this generation. This is our assignment, and we need to understand the assignment, be able to read the room, and then walk it out in obedience to the Lord. Last week, and I've seen some of you email me about this, so I'll address it also. Last week, I did a joint appearance, a campaign appearance with a former political adversary of mine. His name is Joe Kent. We both ran for the same seat in 2022 for Washington State's 3rd Congressional District. I lost that primary to Joe. Joe went on to lose the general election. He's running for that seat again. And I reached out to him several weeks ago and said, I'd like to meet with you because I think that we need to work together. And I want this, and I hope that it does serve as an example to everyone who is listening, who maybe your candidate didn't make it through the primary. You know, maybe the one that you really wanted didn't survive the primary, and now you're faced with a choice that you aren't very excited about. You didn't vote for them in the primary, now you don't want to vote in the general. And I'm here to tell you that that's really burning the forest down despite the trees. We have to begin to work together, and that means that we engage with people who maybe in a Republican primary, we were not friends with. And I think that's okay, you guys. We have to be able to work together. If we don't work together, we're going to continue to lose. And we're going to wind up with Kamala Harris as I shiver to even think, the president of the United States. Speaking of Kamala, I thought you guys would enjoy this. She's gone on another word salad rant. This woman is such an interesting candidate for president of the United States. Never won a primary in her life. She was basically installed by the Democrat Party to run for president. She is running to be, and I want you guys to, maybe this terminology is helpful, she's running to be the CEO of the United States of America. Is she a business owner? I ask you, pray tell. Has she had experience winning elections other than just being installed by President Biden as the vice president of the United States? And the answer is simply no. And so here she is running for president of the United States to be the CEO, and she will have a cabinet around her. So you think about that. So she wants to be the CEO of the United States of America, and then she's going to put people around her in positions of authority. She's going to put a Secretary of Education in place. She's going to put someone there who's going to be the overseer of the federal elections in this country. She's going to put someone in there who is going to oversee the airwaves and what we can and cannot watch on the news in this country. This should alarm you, given the fact that this woman is a Marxist. And I have heard her now say that she's in favor of gun buybacks. I've heard her talk about how she doesn't believe that Americans have a right to privacy in the four walls of their homes. If they get a report that they don't like, bye-bye to your Second Amendment rights and goodbye to unlawful search and seizure. This woman is a true enemy of freedom in the United States. And I think it's worth pointing out that when she says something, whether it's talking about gun buybacks and then, going on to just pander to gun owners and saying that she and Tim Walz are gun owners themselves, I don't believe a thing that comes out of this woman's mouth. And just a couple of days ago, last Thursday, she gave this speech. And I think this is for the Economic Club of Pittsburgh. And by the way, you guys, it's hysterical to me that Kamala Harris is speaking on economics, something she really just needs to go to school to learn about. I heard her talk about how in the world, in one of her only solo interviews last week, they asked her, what are you going to do if you become president of the United States and you don't get the votes from the Congress for raising taxes, and you don't have the money to give all these handouts that she's talking about, $25,000 to people who want to buy homes. Listen, Kamala, why don't you just give people back more of their own money? There's an idea. But she's a big government girl. And her answer was she wants the billionaires in this country to pay their fair share. That is all these guys know how to do. Tax and spend, tax and spend, tax and spend. The government of the United States is on the verge of bankruptcy. And Kamala Harris is going to push it right over the top. But listen to what she said to the Economic Club of Pittsburgh. This is just amazing.
We need to guard that spirit. We have to guard that spirit. Let it always inspire us. Let it always be the source of our optimism.
So touching.
Which is that spirit that is so uniquely American.
Yes.
And let that then inspire us by helping us to be inspired to solve the problems that so many face, including our small business owners. We need to guard that spirit.
Guard that spirit. Just guard that spirit. No one knows what she's talking about, right? Kamala, we don't even know what you're talking about. Guard what spirit? Guard the spirit of Marxism? Is that what you're talking about? What spirit exactly are you talking about? I would venture to say that she wants to guard the spirit of the age. You guys heard a child when he was asked what his opinion was of Kamala Harris just a couple of days ago. If you missed this, or if you missed my Instagram response to it, listen to this. This is a CNN reporter to a child in a classroom asking a kid, what is the first word that pops into your head when you hear the name Kamala Harris? Listen to this.
What's the first word that pops into your head when you hear the name Kamala Harris?
Liar.
Oops, that's a bummer. That's a bummer for Kamala. Here's this kid in a classroom being interviewed by a reporter for CNN who apparently just watches the news. Because if you watch the news for any length of time, you recognize that Kamala Harris is, in fact, a liar. And if we want if we want a liar to be the CEO of the United States of America, then let's just go right ahead, Christians, and stay home. Did you know that Christians have the worst record for voting? It's right up there with the NEA. The gun owners are the worst. Gun owners, the people who yell and scream about how they want their Second Amendment rights, but they don't actually get out to vote to put somebody in position of authority who would protect those rights. No, they're giving all their money to the NEA, and the NEA is getting rich, but they're not getting out and voting. The cognitive dissonance in this conversation when it comes to voters and people who should care about religious liberty, they should care about medical liberty, they should care about the right to bear arms, they should care about the First Amendment, the right to say what's on your mind, the Second Amendment, the right to defend yourself, and yet we're not getting out and voting. It's astonishing to me. And so we have a lot of things thinking about, a lot of things to be praying about in the months to come. And I'm going to continue to be out there on the road talking to people. By the way, if you guys want to know where I will be, this coming weekend, I'm going to be in Spokane, Washington for the We Believe, We Vote Summit. That's Spokane, Washington. If you guys want to find out more about these, you can just head on over to my website, HeidiSt.com/events. Shortly after that, on October 11th, I'll be in Montrose, Colorado for a conference called Awakening a Warrior. You guys know I love that title. Awakening a Warrior. It's a homeschool conference for women on October 11th. And then I'm scooting on over to Columbus, Ohio for a Salem Media event. Really excited to be working with my friends at Salem Media. That event is called Inspire, an evening with Heidi St. John. Again, that's October 13th in Columbus, Ohio. And then right after that, October 26th, I will be in Charlotte, North Carolina for the E-Women, Extraordinary Women's Have Faith Tour. That's October the 26th. Though my October really full, I'm going to be zipping all over the place. I hope to meet you guys. Come on out and say hello. I love to hug your neck. And just thank you for being a listener to the show. By the way, if you guys haven't done it already, would you take it a step further and just set your app to automatically download this podcast? That means that as soon as the podcast comes out and we publish it here, you'll be the first to get it on your devices. It really helps us tell iTunes and Spotify and others that you don't want to miss the podcast, and then in turn really helps us with our distribution. So thank you guys for doing that. All right, I'm going to turn my attention to your questions, and I love answering questions here. I've been doing it now for 9 years. The way to get your questions submitted to me, where I'm not going to lose it, is simply to go to HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday, and you will see a form there where you can submit questions and comments to the podcast. You can give us guest ideas, give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. We also take the time to read the reviews that you leave for the show over at places like iTunes and Spotify. This was a really great review that was left on Apple recently, and she said, "I cannot get enough of what Heidi has to say." Boy, I'm just going to put that on a plaque in my house because I don't know that my kids would necessarily agree with you, but I appreciate it. She said, "I look forward to every single podcast and love every guest that she brings on. I became a mother 10 months ago. And though I have been a believer myself since I was a young girl, I have a new burning desire to train my daughter in truth in the troubling times that we live in. You have confirmed my hopes to homeschool and truly helped me point back to God's word, our ultimate guidebook." I love that review. Thank you so much for leaving it. Jana in Texas said that she heard me speak, and she's from Louisiana, but she heard me speak in Texas, and she was convicted that she needed the courage to find the courage to stand up for what is right. She said she went to the homeschool conference to learn more about homeschooling. They're currently a public school family. And as an added bonus, got to meet my hero. Thank you for everything. Well, thank you, Jana. Such a pleasure to meet you guys. Everywhere that we go out on the road, it is one of my favorite things to do is just to say hello to you, hear what God's doing in your life, pray with you. And I find a great deal of encouragement just hearing what God's doing in your life. So reach out to me, HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday. Also, I want to encourage you, a brand spanking new study just dropped at my women's ministry. It's called Faith That Speaks, because I want you to learn to have a faith that speaks. Your faith should have a voice in the culture, a voice in your family, a voice in your communities, a voice in your place of employment. We are called to speak on behalf of the Lord of Heaven's armies. And so my women's ministry, which is appropriately called Faith That Speaks, drops a new Bible study every single month. And I have written one that is that we are just now getting into today, actually, and it is called Kingdom Culture. It is called Kingdom Culture, and we've kind of boiled it down to several areas in the culture where I feel like God would have us be as Christians. And if you'd like to do that study, it is a biblical breaking down of what God says our role should be as men and women in the culture today. So again, you can find that at faiththatspeaks.com. This is a great time of year to cultivate a habit of being in the Bible. And I hope you guys will do that. And I can't wait to hear what happens as we study what it means to actually bring a piece of heaven to earth and create a kingdom culture right where we live. This comment came in from YouTube from Megan. And she saw the podcast that I did, I guess it's been a couple of weeks ago now, right? Where my little granddaughter, Juniper, came in the studio. And I told you guys, I think just out of the corner of my eye, it's not uncommon for, my assistant or another staffer to come in here and just put a note down for me so I don't forget things. And I saw out of the corner of my eye, my door open, and I thought, well, that's what was going to happen. And then I thought, boy, whatever just opened the door now seems to be on the floor. Just sort of see it in my periphery. So I turn around and there's my little granddaughter, Junie. And Junie's crawling on the floor. And I was like, what are you doing, Junie? And she said, well, I was looking for a snack. And so rather than turn off the show, I just let her sit on my lap and kibitz with me for a minute. And Megan said this was the best moment ever on the show when little Juniper walked in. I love that you paused to love on her and give her your full attention. Well, I got to tell you guys, the greatest joy of my life is hands down, my family, my marriage to my wonderful husband. I hope you guys enjoyed our 35th, not 25th, our 35th anniversary edition of the podcast. Jay usually comes on about once a year. I'd like for him to do it more. It's not really his jam, but I will tell you that we are getting ready to move into a new studio. My son and several of our team members have been working on that studio here at Firmly Planted. And we will be teaching classes at the Homeschool Resource Center, teaching kids how to do their own media there. And then also I will be using that part-time as my studio as well. So pretty soon we're going to switch to a mostly in-person format. So think sort of, Candace Owens meets Joe Rogan with a touch of Kay Arthur in there. And I'm going to start interviewing people in person. And I'm hoping that you will see more of my husband in that environment, because he really is just a wonderful human being, and it has been my joy to be married to him for 35 years. So excited that he was able to come on the show, and I hope you guys really enjoyed that. All right, an anonymous listener in Missouri wrote in to say, "Hi, Heidi. I've been a Christian for about 20 years. I read and study my Bible. I'm praying. I'm involved in a wonderful church and will serve anytime I am able." Well, that's great. I love this. I'm almost embarrassed by asking, but how much time in a day should I be reading and studying my Bible and praying? I see other godly women consuming so much of their day studying and praying. I can't possibly do that much. Take care of my kids in the household. Respectfully seeking your wisdom and advice. Well, first of all, anonymous in Missouri, it sounds to me like you're living a life that would honor the Lord. And you're serving your family. That's your first obligation. Your first primary responsibility is to serve your family, your husband, your children. And remember, I always take women back to, and men too, actually, what I believe is an abundance principle, an overflow principle. God is a God of abundance. And I think it's easy for us to sort of fall into, the checklist. If I just do this, and this right, then God's going to be pleased with me. And we lose the joy of just the relationship with the Lord, the excitement of being in His Word every day and seeing what He has to say to us through reading His Word. But the abundance principle starts with you and the Lord together, right? So out of an overflow, an abundance of what God does between you and Him and your time with Him, you pour then into your spouse. And out of an overflow of what God does in your spouse, you pour into your children. Out of an overflow of what God does in a healthy family, then we pour into the world around us, and we start ministries, or we start, blogging, or whatever it is. But when we get that backward, when we miss God's heart, or especially if we start, we think, we misunderstand, and we think, well, my primary responsibility then is to be an influencer in my community to the detriment of my family, that would never be God's heart. And it sounds to me like you're doing what God would want you to do. You're reading, you're studying your Bible, you're praying, you're involved in your church, and you're serving when you're able. It sounds to me like you're just doing great. I wouldn't put a timer on it. Every day when I wake up, I have the opportunity to open up my Bible, and you guys, I'll be honest, some days I don't do it. Some days I sleep past my alarm, or some days I wake up and I'm foggy headed and I can't do it, or my phone's already ringing, or whatever. The Lord is not a legalistic God. But what we want to understand is there is a blessing that we get from walking in right relationship with Him and from taking the time to be in His Word. But don't start putting timers on it and making it a legalistic thing. I don't want my kids to do that to me. And God sees you as His child. He doesn't want you to do that to Him. It sounds to me like you're doing just fine. Maggie in Michigan wrote in to say, "My children all love to read, and I would love a list of books that children should read as they go through upper elementary and middle school. You mentioned on the show that you have a list, but I have not been able to find it on your website. Maggie, you are in luck. Every year I publish 2 lists. One is my favorite books for Thanksgiving. We have a library at our house that I have been building for over 30 years for our kids. And every year I try to add something to it, a book that I've read. And in fact, this year, let me see if I can pull it up. I am reading this book. You guys, let's look at this thing. Look at this bad boy. This is the book I'm reading right now. Can you guys see this? It's Wayne Grudem's book called Politics According to the Bible. And whoa, and I haven't gotten far enough into it to tell you if I agree with him or not, but I'm reading it. So there's a good book. You guys can start there. But I think I publish every year a list of books that I think are wonderful for Christmas, a list of books I think are wonderful for Thanksgiving, and I'm about to put together a list of books that I think are just wonderful in general. And a lot of those suggestions I have gotten from my friend Jane Lambert over at 5 in a Row. And some of the best books I ever read came out of me doing unit studies through a curriculum called Sunlight, and I will list some of those, and we'll put it out in an email, and then I'll link back to it on my website. But just look for the Thanksgiving list and for the Christmas list. And I would say every year, just sort of add to it and then make a habit of reading to your children. Maggie, you cannot go wrong. Courtney in Boring, Oregon. First of all, Courtney, let's just pause for Boring, Oregon. Okay, I'll just a moment of silence. Boring, Oregon. You guys know that I spent a lot of years in a little town called Boring, Oregon that sits in the shadow of beautiful Mount Hood. And I love that town, named after Mr. and Mrs. Boring. But you wouldn't know it. People think the town is boring. It's anything but boring. It's beautiful. And I'm glad to hear from you, Courtney. She wrote in and said, Heidi, thank you for all you do. You are welcome. You were one of the first voices I began listening to when homeschooling was first put on my radar, and you've been an encouragement. I'm a first-time homeschool mom with 3 boys, ages 6, 4, and almost 2. K4 and first grade boys. Doing a Becca, as that is what my first grader used for his kindergarten last year. I love having the structure for my kids, but I'd rather use something that will create a love of learning. What curricula do you recommend for the next year that allows me to have a plan, but they would actually enjoy? Also, what read aloud books would you recommend for this age group? I'm slightly overwhelmed and overthinking and slightly perfectionist, just trying to do this thing right. So first of all, Courtney, in Boring, you are close enough, my dear, to come to the Homeschool Resource Center in Vancouver. So hop in your little Pontiac and get on over here. Look it up, Firmly Planted Homeschool Resource Center, just across the river in Vancouver, Washington. It's probably about a 45-minute drive for you. And we have a bookstore here. We have a coffee shop here, over 200 classes that your kids can take. We just taught a class for parents the other night, beginning homeschooling. Get involved in what we're doing here in the greater Portland metropolitan, Vancouver, Washington area. I think it's really going to bless you. I think you're going to benefit from the list that I'm putting together of books. I'm working on that, and as soon as we have it available, we'll send it out in an email. So get on my email list. You can sign up for that at my website, HeidiSt.John.com. But I think it sounds to me that you're doing what I did when I first took my kids out of school, and I started also with a Becca because that's what we were used to, and that's what she had done in the little private Christian school. And I think that there are lots of really good things about Becca. I actually love their phonics program. I did it with all of my kids. I would graduate them from Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons into Becca, into their reading. I thought that it got really, really dry right about the 4th grade. Right about 4th grade, everything is just like, wah, wah. And all we're doing now is just opening up workbooks. I did not use them for things like history, but I really did like their phonics program. And I didn't think their math workbooks were terrible either. I'm pretty sure I used those off and on as well. So I guess I would steer you toward what I would call delight-directed learning. Learn about Charlotte Mason. That was my favorite way of educating our children. I read a book, and I'll link back to it in the show notes today, called A Pocket Full of Pine Cones by Karen Andriola, one of my favorite books on homeschooling, because she really sort of introduces mothers to the gentle art of learning. And what Steve Lampert said on my show the other day, I think is absolutely true. We want our children to have a love for learning. So not just educate them. We want to give them a love for education so that long after they leave our home, they're still picking up books and learning. They're still interested in learning a new skill or learning a new language. And then they pass that love of learning on to their children. And so I love your heart, because I think you're right. The structure is good. And I think kids need structure. There's something to be said for the moms who are like, okay, this is the way that our day's going to go. And I made, lots and lots of charts in my home. I'm a checklist girl. So I had, chore charts, and everybody had kind of a thing to do. We had, I tried to have as much structure as I could because, I had 6 children and then 7 that I was homeschooling. And it was very, very busy. And so I think in that sense, the structure is really good. But I think if I could go back and do it again, I would have loved the process more and been worried about the result a little bit less. And so you're in a great place to sort of examine how you want this to go down and what you want your kids to take away from it. And remember, you guys, academics is important, but relationships will trump the ABCs every single time. It's relationship, relationship, relationship. Long after you close the last page of that math book and you're done teaching, long division, and you've taught them hopefully the principles principles that made this nation the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and they understand the Bill of Rights, and they can write intelligently. By the grace of God, you're still going to have a relationship with them. So never sacrifice your relationships with your children over an academic pursuit. Rather, foster the relationship, find the curriculum that is going to be life-giving for your family. Listen, kids are different. And, some kids really thrive in a classical model of education. That was not my children, but some kids really do well. I know my friend Sam Sorbo loved her time in classical conversations. I loved a Charlotte Mason approach and more of a literary approach to education, and that is how we raised our children. Listen, your children have been given to you by the Lord, and He will give you the strength and the grace to understand the assignment so that you can educate your children in a way that is both life-giving, God-honoring, and academically excellent. So come to the Homeschool Resource Center, Courtney, and when you do, come by and say hello. I'd love to meet you. She had a piggyback question. She said, could you give advice for a mom in her first year of homeschooling that has chosen a full box, kind of boring curriculum to make it to the end of the year? So now she's asking if she's going to confuse her kids by switching. No, you're not. I think that's one of the best things about homeschooling. Do what works for you. If it doesn't work, I've been known to change curriculum in the middle of the year. I'll switch horses midstream if it's not working for me. That's what you need to do. And I understand that you are, that structure and that rigidity is kind of your safety net. It's what's making you feel like you're doing it right. But I'd encourage you to look up a method called notebooking. I notebooked with our kids. We did lap books and notebooks. And I think the way that you make learning fun and you instill a love for learning is you don't turn into that screaming, yelling homeschool mom, run around your house like a clown with your hair on fire, complaining about how no one ever listens to you and no one does their assignment. You got to lean into the Lord. It is a very special thing for the Lord to invite you on a journey. And that journey is home education. And it will be as much about you and what God wants to do in your life as it will ever be about your children and what God's doing in their life. So lean into Him. Let them see you spending time in the Word of God. And by the way, read to your children. I love the YWAM missionary stories. There's a good thing to start your day off with. Read a little bit in the Psalms with your kids. Read stories that are life-giving to them. Read biographies, people that followed God with a reckless abandon, and God did something amazing in their life. You will never regret the time that you spend reading with your kids. An anonymous listener in Rosalia, Washington, wrote in to say, after 27 years of homeschooling, my youngest is 17 and at home alone a lot. She's asking about public school sports. We are rural, so there are no other community options available. I've never done anything with public school. Do I even want to open this door just to do sports? Well, first of all, congratulations on 27 years of homeschooling. Well done, Mama. And secondly, I would say I resonate with what you're saying because we've got one child left at home and she's home alone, not home alone a lot, but she's missing the interaction that our older kids got with their siblings. And I really do think it can be hard on the youngest, especially when you're talking about big families and maybe they were used to that big family and they had a lot going on and now all of a sudden they don't. And I think that's really hard. Part of the reason why we started the Homeschool Resource Center was to give families like yours opportunities for their kids to engage. I don't want to answer this question for you simply because I think that you need to hear from the Lord on this one. I don't know what's going on in Rosalia, Washington. I don't know the school district that you're in. You guys know me. I am loath to participate in anything at any level with the public schools for all the hundreds of thousands of reasons that I've already told you guys. But I've also seen it work for some families to do sports and that kind of thing through the public school. So I would say pray about it, maybe talk to some people, definitely interview people. At the end of the day, what you want for your last one at home is to be walking with the Lord and leave your home and graduate, which sounds like she or he are going to do here pretty quickly, with a sense of gratitude. And so as much as you can lean into that relationship, do it. Keep me posted. I'm really interested to see what you end up doing. Anonymous in Texas would like advice for a newly homeschooling teen who is very strong-willed and is of the mindset of public school experiences. For example, my teen is used to coming home from being at a public school all day, then spending hours doing homework, and now our homeschool studies are minimal hours each day, and yet my teen feels like it's just not enough. I've heard the term unschool, but I'm not sure I have a clear understanding of it. We're a Christian family, and I've no doubt God has directed our path for homeschool. But like my teen, I'm learning as I go. And yet it has us at odds and frustrated more than it has us enjoying the process. So here's the thing. When you've been in a public school your whole life, or even in a Christian school for that matter, homeschooling is a lifestyle change. It's not just this thing that you do, from 8 to 1 in the afternoon or whatever, the times that you decide to do formal education. And I think part of it is what you're doing right now is just coming alongside your daughter and saying, we're going to try something new. And maybe you take some of those hours that she was at school and you start baking with her. Anybody think about taking up sourdough? By the way, I've got a great little fun thing. I'll put it up here probably the next week or two. We have dehydrated my sourdough starter. It's called Seaside Sourdough. I'll give you guys the kind of the backstory behind it. But we've got some really fun Christmas gifts that we're going to start shipping out here. So if you're interested in getting a sourdough starter from Heidi St. John's Kitchen, we have them ready and available. You can grab Seaside Sourdough probably starting here in the next week or so at my website. And I really hope that maybe this is something you can take up with your kids. I think there's something to be said for picking up hobbies with your kids, for learning new skills with your kids. I love homemaking and have passed that love of homemaking, I hope, onto my children. We just recently decorated our home for fall. We've been doing that now for, all of their lives. And I think just because, just the fact that you are seeing this in your child and you recognizing, oh, hey, this is what I want to do better, tells me you are going to do just fine. You're going to do just fine. So there's no reason. I mean, really, we've just been schooled into believing, why was your daughter or your son in school for all of those hours? It's because most of what they're doing in the schools is just crowd control. You don't have that anymore. And so, bam, a whole bunch of those hours that they would have been spending trying to teach 30 children one subject, you've got one child that you're teaching one subject. It goes much faster, and you're able to get more done in a condensed amount of time. So maybe the thing to do is ask your child, what would you like to learn? Right? Maybe go beyond just the reading, writing, and arithmetic. I don't know what you guys are doing for curriculum or where you're, academically what you're pursuing. But I think, boy, add some things in there that are going to be life-giving and fun. Like I said, I love sourdough. So maybe you just take up making sourdough. I don't know. Something to think about. Let me know how it goes. Robin in Minnesota says, hi, Heidi, I listened to your show with Steve Lambert about starting strong this homeschool year, and I was encouraged, but I have a follow-up question. Steve mentioned that the mark of a successful homeschooler is having kids that love learning and love reading. We are in year 6, and we have 5 kids ranging from 11th grade down to 2 years old. I set out with the goal for my kids to love learning and have tried to make it a hands-on adventure from the beginning. However, I don't see a love of learning developing in any of my kids. I have sat back, so to speak, and given them space to explore and hopefully become excited about a topic on their own, but I just don't see a love of learning and self-motivated learning beginning. Do you have any suggestions? Every day is mostly hurrying through to get school done so they can go out and do whatever they think is fun, and it breaks my heart. I myself was a public school student my whole education and definitely did the work to pass the test only to forget everything. Okay, so a couple of things, and she's saying, yes, she does find a comfort in a boxed curriculum. So a couple of things, I think you heard Steve and I say this, and we both took the same approach with our children in that we read with our kids. I mean, I'm reading right now out of The Silver Hand with my 14-year-old. I just do not think that you can substitute for reading. If you are hoping to see, a grown-up response to the fact that you've homeschooled your kids in your younger children, I think you might be asking a little bit too much. I mean, I think we see that love for learning really develop when our kids have kids of their own and when they become adults. And you're not quite there yet. You have an 11th grader, so you're kind of at the jumping off place. But I think, lean into that relationship. If you're rushing to get through school, or if school just feels like something that you check off a list, ask the Lord to give you a different perspective. Ask the Lord to show you, what would it look like if you were to change your methodology a little bit, or maybe you change the schedule with your kids. But I wouldn't put too much on yourself. I think, homeschool moms especially, we are very prone to guilt and to anxiety. I love to tell homeschool moms, look at us. You're like Captain Anxiety, able to leap to the worst conclusion in a single bound. And your conclusion is that your kids are not going to love learning, but you don't know that yet because the jury's still out. So, our job, and for goodness sake, I don't have time today, but I could sit here and go on and on and on for probably hours about all the mistakes I made in homeschooling and, the days that I thought, well, that didn't work. In fact, I think that might be the title of my next book. I think I'm going to call it, well, that didn't work. And just go back over all the things that I tried that didn't work, and yet God used them anyway, because that's what he does. God's good like that. And I think, the main thing that you want your kids to walk away with is that you loved them and that you spent time with them and that you invested in them and that you loved learning and you loved teaching them. It doesn't mean that you love every second of it. It certainly doesn't mean that you are going to do it without making mistakes or without having bad days, but bad days don't make bad moms, right? Sometimes you're going to have a bad year. Bad years don't make bad moms either. And God is doing something in your family. And so trust the process that the Lord is still at work. And if you're a dad listening to this today and you've noticed that your homeschool wife already needs to be peeled off the ceiling with a spatula, maybe it's time to sit down and reevaluate. What are some things that you could be doing with your children that are life-giving? Maybe plan ahead. The holidays are coming up. I can't believe I'm saying that. But the holidays are coming up. And we've got opportunities to do things that are life-giving with our kids. And maybe you're making Christmas cookies with them this year. Maybe you're constructing a nativity set out of wood in your garage that you guys can display in your front yard. Think about things ahead of time a little bit that you can do to make these months memorable for your children that don't necessarily have to do with cracking a book open. And every time you learn something like that with your kids, you are learning something new and you are creating a love of learning in your kids. So let the process play out and keep me posted. Last comment comes from Karen in Grand Bay, Alabama. And she's writing to say, in response to the recent Mailbox Monday question about starting a library, she wants to let our listeners know that there are private lending libraries nationwide already, with many more in the works. I love that. She says she has one, and she's part of a larger network of others doing the same. We are mostly current or former homeschool moms, of course you are, and running them out of our homes, though a few have freestanding space. And here's the website for you guys. You ready? Write this down. This is so cool, Karen. Biblioguides.com, BIBLIOGUIDES, biblioguides.com/libraries to find one near you. Check back often. There are many more in the works. And for help and inspiration starting your own, you can go to plumfieldandpaideia.com/the card catalog. I will link back to that in the show notes today. Way too long of a link for me to try to get to you right now. So I'll link back to that in the show notes today. Karen, thank you for sending that in. I really appreciate that. One more thing before I go today, and we're out of time. My 2025 schedule is pretty much full. I've got, I think, 2 open weekends. If you guys are interested in bringing me to your event in 2025, please reach out to me. HeidiSt.com/events. It's what I love to do. I love speaking. Speaking is my jam. I love traveling and speaking and meeting you guys and hearing what God's doing in your life. Also, we have some super awesome, really great stuff, merchandise-wise, coming out for you at the beginning of next year. Big surprise that I have been working on for literally 10 years. Can't wait to show you, and you guys are going to hear more about that in the days to come. Don't forget to join my women's Bible study at faiththatspeaks.com. You can join me for the October study called Kingdom Culture, Bringing Heaven to Earth. You have a part to play. You can sign up right now at faiththatspeaks.com. You can check out my speaking schedule at HeidiSt.com/events. Thanks to our sponsor today, Tuvu. Tuvu is social media that you guys can actually love and trust. You can watch what you want to watch and say what you want to say at tuvu.com/Heidi. Check them out today. tuvu.com/Heidi. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope I see you at an event in your neck of the woods, and I will see you right back here again at the intersection of faith and culture.